Friday night. Feeling lonely myself. I am tangling with some challenging emotions. So I thought, what better time than to jump into a just chatting stream with my Twitch group. And yes, it is exclusive. Okay, keep. Yes, that's okay. Yeah, boy oh boy. I don't know what it's gonna take for these channels of mine to take off. My TikTok, my Twitch, my YouTube. These are challenging times for me personally. But yeah, let's distract ourselves with some Russian author writings, and after this we'll have some Phoenix Wright for you all to enjoy. And yeah, thank you in advance for anyone who is going to join this just chatting, because y'all are the real ones. The ones who watch this stream and who chat in the chat. It's been an absolute battle for me to stand out on Twitch. At times I've thought about stopping streaming just because of how difficult it's been. I don't know if I'll ever get to that point. I might wait until the conclusion of Crime and Punishment before I get to that point, but hey, who knows? Okay, Chapter 7, War and Peace. On the 12th of November, Kutuzov's active army encamped before Olmütz was preparing to be reviewed next day by the two emperors, the Russian and the Austrian. The guards, just arrived from Russia, spent the night 10 miles from Olmütz, and next morning were to come straight to the review, reaching the field at Olmütz by 10 o'clock. That day, Nicholas Rostov received a letter from Boris, telling him that the Izmailov regiment was quartered for the night 10 miles from Olmütz, and that he wanted to see him as he had a letter and money for him. Rostov was particularly in need of money now that the troops, after their active service, were stationed near Olmütz, and the camp swarmed with well-provisioned sutlers and Austrian Jews offering all sorts of tempting wares. The Pavlograds held feast after feast, celebrating awards they'd received from the campaign, and made expeditions to Olmütz to visit a certain Caroline the Hungarian, who had recently opened a restaurant there with girls as waitresses. I'm actually glad we're getting back to the action, because it got a little bit tedious reading about all of the Russian family marriage arrangements, Russian royalty marriage arrangements, who had just celebrated his promotion to a cornetcy and bought Denisov's horse. Let's see, cornetcy is a brass instrument resembling a trumpet but shorter and wider. But that's not how this is being used. Wind instrument. I guess he's like playing the instrument in the regiment, I guess. Yeah, I guess so. He got like promoted to the band, I guess. And that's Rostov who did. Bedouin was in debt all around to his comrades and the sutlers. On receiving Boris's letter, he rode with a fellow officer to Olmütz, dined there, drank a bottle of wine, and then set off alone to the guards' camp to find his old playmate. Rostov had not yet had time to get his uniform. He had on a shabby cadet jacket decorated with a soldier's cross, equally shabby cadet's riding breeches lined with worn leather, and an officer's saber with a sword knot. The Don horse he was riding was one he had bought from a Cossack during the campaign, and he wore a crumpled hussar cap stuck jauntily back on one side of his head. As he rode up to the camp, he thought how he would impress Boris and all his comrades of the guards by his appearance, that of a fighting hussar who had been under fire. The guards had made their whole march as if on a pleasure trip, parading their cleanliness and discipline. They had come by easy stages, their knapsacks conveyed on carts, and the Austrian authorities had provided excellent dinners for the officers at every halting place. The regiments had entered and left the town with their bands playing, and by the Grand Duke's orders, the men had marched all the way in step, practice on which the guards prided themselves. Like they're showing off their discipline and attire. I should say that if I can quickly compare the two, I think Crime and Punishment has been more of a joy for me to read. Crime and Punishment at times just kind of seems like the ramblings of Leo. Like, okay, dude, I get it. They're getting married. Can we please get back to the action? The name of the book is War and Peace, for goodness sake. Anyway, Berg, who had obtained his captaincy during the campaign, had gained the confidence of his superiors by his promptitude and accuracy, and had arranged his money matters very satisfactorily. Boris, during the campaign, had made the acquaintance of many persons who might prove useful to him. By a letter of recommendation he had brought from Pierre, from Pierre had become acquainted with Prince Andrew Bolkonsky, through whom he hoped to obtain a post on the commander-in-chief's staff. Berg and Boris, having rested after yesterday's march, were sitting, clean and neatly dressed, at a round table in the clean quarters allotted to them, playing chess. Berg held a smoking pipe between his knees. Boris, in the accurate way characteristic of him, was building a little pyramid of chessmen with his delicate white fingers while awaiting Berg's move. Watched his opponent's face, evidently thinking about the game as he always thought, only of whatever he was engaged on. "Well, how are you going to get out of that?" he remarked. "We'll try to," replied Berg, touching a pawn and then removing his hand. "Yeah, I am not the, what are they called? I can't remember. This laptop keeps getting disconnected from the internet. While I'm waiting to get it disconnected, I am following some of the Elden Ring coverage. It looks like a pretty cool game. I doubt that I'll get into the beta testing group. I'm just not a super big popular streamer, but I can definitely stream my gameplay of it once I'm given access, whenever that's going to be. I mean, it might not even be until next year by the time I get in. But yeah, it looks good, and I've always been a fan of the Soul series. I've been a big fan of Dark Souls 1, 2, and 3, and the DLCs. I never actually played Bloodborne because I just never had a PS4. But if it does ever get ported actually to PC, then at that point I may try it. Bloodborne. And yeah, I anticipate playing Elden Ring once I have access and or once it gets released. Okay, the Bodes sisters. I could not remember their name. Yeah, I am not like them. I think I understand the basic rules of chess and like how some of the pieces move, like knights move in elf formations and pawns move one space at a time, but like I'm not super duper savvy when it comes to chess. Like, I don't even think I've ever actually played a game against anybody. Yeah, Elden Ring looks awesome. I'm really looking forward to playing it if and whenever I get the chance to. Okay, but anyway. Yeah, not super good at chess. So, yeah. Like, I know how like I said, some of the pieces move, but like in terms of like strategies and stuff like that, like I never really got that into chess. seems like a cool game, but yeah, I think I've always been more into like card games and stuff like that. Yeah, I think it's one of those things where it's like if I had a social group of people I knew that played chess and we can play together and they could like work with me on my strategies and play chess with me, then like I could at some point see myself getting into chess. But like I don't know anyone who plays. I don't even own a chess set, so it's just one of those things that's always been on the wayside. Okay, at that moment the door opened. Here he is at last, shouted Rostov. And Berg too. Oh, you Petisen fans. Yeah, I have no idea. Allez coucher dormir. Is he trying to speak Spanish? I don't know. He exclaimed, imitating his Russian nurse's French, at which he and Boris used to laugh long ago. Dear me, how you've changed. Boris rose to meet Rostov, but in doing so did not omit to steady and replace some chessmen that were falling. He was about to embrace his friend, but Nicholas avoided him. With that peculiar feeling of youth, that dread of beaten tracks, and wish to express itself in a manner different from that of its elders, which is often insincere, Nicholas wished to do something special on meeting his friend. And I think it's somewhat more understandable that they're playing chess, because this, you have to remember, this is before the days of video games. So yeah, chess might have been more popular just for that reason. It's like, hey, we can play chess. I don't even know if checkers have been invented yet. Let me see. So yeah, checkers was around. Apparently, the oldest form of the game was founded like 3000 BCE, so something like 5,000 years ago. Makes sense. I think checkers is one of those games that's changed over time. Alright. He wanted to pinch him, push him, do anything but kiss him, a thing everybody did. But notwithstanding this, Boris embraced him in a quiet, friendly way and kissed him 3 times. They had not met for nearly half a year, and being at the age when young men take their first steps on life's road, each saw immense changes in the other, quite a new reflection of the society in which they had taken those first steps. Both had changed greatly since they last met, and both were in a hurry to show the changes that had taken place in them. Oh, you damn dandies. Clean and fresh as if you'd been to a feat. Not like us sinners of the line, cried Rostov, with martial swagger and with baritone notes in his voice, new to Boris, pointing to his own mud-bespattered breeches. The German landlady, hearing Rostov's loud voice, popped her head in at the door. Yeah, life changes people in pretty interesting ways. The people who live, that is. The people who survive through life's challenges. Whew. And yeah, sometimes life's challenges takes a toll on our relationships too. I'll just leave it at that. Is she pretty? He asked with a wink. Why do you shout so? You'll frighten them, said Boris. I did not expect you today, he added. I only sent you the note yesterday by Bolkonsky, an adjutant of Kutuzov's, who's a friend of mine. I did not think he would get it to you so quickly. Well, how are you? Been under fire already? Asked Boris. Without answering, Rostov shook the soldier's cross of St. George fastened to the cording of his uniform, and indicating a bandaged arm, glanced at Berg with a smile. As you see, he said. Indeed, yes, said Boris with a smile. And we, too, have had a splendid march. You know, of course, that this Imperial Highness rode with our regiment all the time, so that we had every comfort and every advantage. What receptions we had in Poland. What dinners and balls. I can't tell you. And the Tsarevich was very gracious to all our officers. it was probably like the Americans arriving in France. They're like, woohoo! Yeah, they're like really happy to see them because they've basically been dominated by the Nazis in the case of World War II, and the Frenchmen in the case of the Poland, in case of the Polish people in the Napoleonic War era. Yeah, Poland just tends to get conquered. And the two friends told each other of their doings, and one of his hussar revels and life in the fighting line, the other of the pleasures of and advantages of service under members of the imperial family. "Oh, you guards," said Rostov. "I say, send for some wine." Boris made a grimace. "If you really want it," said he. He went to his bed, drew a purse from under the clean pillow, and sent for wine. "Yes, and I have some money and a letter to give you," he added. Rostov took the letter and, throwing the money on the sofa, put both arms on the table and began to read. After reading a few lines, he glanced angrily at Berg, then, meeting his eyes, hid his face behind the letter. "Well, they've sent you a tidy sum," said Berg, eyeing the heavy purse that sank into the sofa. "As for us, Count, we get along on our pay. I can tell you for myself." "I say, Berg, my dear fellow," said Rostov, "when you get a letter from home and meet one of your own people whom you want to talk everything over with, and I happen to be there, I'll go at once, to be out of your way. Do go somewhere, anywhere, to the devil," he exclaimed, and immediately seizing him by the shoulder and looking amiably into his face, evidently wishing to soften the rudeness of his words, he added, "Don't be hurt, my dear fellow. You know I speak from my heart as to an old acquaintance." "Oh, don't mention it, Count. I quite understand," said Berg, getting up and speaking in a muffled and guttural voice. "Go across to our hosts. They invited you," added Boris. Berg put on the cleanest of coats, without a spot or speck of dust, and stood before a looking-glass, brushed the hair on his temples upwards in the way affected by the Emperor Alexander, and, having assured himself from the way Rostov looked at it that his coat had been noticed, left the room with a pleasant smile. "Oh dear, what a beast I am," muttered Rostov as he read the letter. "Why?" "Oh, what a pig I am not to have written and to have given them such a fright. What a pig I am," he repeated, flushing suddenly. "Well, have you sent Gabriel for some wine? All right, let's have some." In the letter from his parents was enclosed a letter of recommendation to Bagration, which the old Countess at Anna Mikhailovna's advice had obtained through an acquaintance and sent to her son, asking him to take it to its destination and make use of it. "What nonsense! Much I need it," said Rostov, throwing the letter under the table. "Why have you thrown that away?" asked Boris. "It is some letter of recommendation. What the devil do I want it for?" "Why, what the devil?" said Boris, picking it up and reading the address. "This letter would be of great use to you." "I want nothing, and I won't be anyone's assistant. I'm not going to be anyone's second banana, dang it." "Why not?" inquired Boris. "It's a lackey's job." "You're still the same dreamer, I see," remarked Boris, shaking his head. "And you're still the same diplomatist. But that's not the point. Come, how are you?" asked Rostov. To muse on every dream not granted." Anyway, as you see, so far everything's alright. Every dream not realized, I should say. As you see, every wish not granted, every dream not realized. As you see, so far everything's alright, but I confess I should much like to be an adjutant and not remain at the front. Why? Because once a man starts on military service, he should try to make a successful career of it as possible. I should say so. I mean, what does failure mean in the context of military service? Death is one possibility. Desertion. I mean, there is such a thing as dishonorable discharge. And I think even worst case is like military trial or something like that. Which I don't know what would have been the what's it called? What the parallel would have been back then. "That's it," said Rostov, evidently thinking of something else. He looked intently and inquiringly into his friend's eyes, evidently trying in vain to find the answer to some question. Old Gabriel brought in the wine. Shouldn't we now send for Berg? Asked Boris. He would drink with you. I can't. Well, send for him. And how do you get on with that German? Asked Rostov with a contemptuous smile. He's a very, very nice, honest, and pleasant fellow, answered Boris. Prussia. I think Prussia and Germany were... Let's see. I believe they were both opposed to Napoleon. Let's see. It was in 1871 that they were considered one country. Germany and Prussia. And this was before that, so at the time they must have been different countries. Alright, I gotta be right back. I gotta use the bathroom. Thank you for watching, my lone viewer. You are the special one. I'm back. Alright. There we go. Germany and Prussia unified in 1871, with Prussia being the dominant power. There's definitely a lot of history. Like, whew. You can even look at all the Reichs, like the Reichstag. What's it called? The Reichs, the First Reich. The original German Empire. I believe it would have originated from around that time period, 1871. Boy. Alrighty. Yeah, even the Russian history is pretty fascinating to learn about. Like all the different houses and tsardoms. Pretty interesting stuff. Again, Rostov looked intently into Boris's eyes and sighed. Berg returned, and over a bottle of wine, conversation between the three officers became animated. The guardsmen told Rostov of their march and how they had been made much of in Russia, Poland, and abroad. They spoke of the sayings and doings of their commander, the Grand Duke, and told stories of his kindness and irascibility. I might be saying that wrong. Irascibility. Easily angered. Berg, as usual, kept silent when the subject did not relate to himself. But in connection with the stories of the Grand Duke's quick temper, he related with gusto how in Galicia he had managed to deal with the Grand Duke when the latter made a tour of the regiments and was annoyed at the irregularity of a movement. With a pleasant smile, Berg related how the Grand Duke had ridden up to him in a violent passion, shouting, "Arnotts." Arnotts was the Tsarevich's favorite expression when he was in a rage, and called for the company commander. Tsarevich, I believe, is the heir to the title of Tsar, I believe. Yeah. So it's the Tsar's son. I believe it's all of the Tsar's sons are known as Tsarevich. So pretty fascinating. In 1797, Pauline House law, the title was discontinued and replaced with Tsarevich for the heir apparent alone. So that was in 1797 that happened. I thought that was the case. The Tsarevich was the heir. Anyway, would you believe it, Count? I was not at all alarmed because I knew what was right. Without boasting, I may say that I know the army orders by heart and know the regulations as well as I do the Lord's Prayer. The Lord's Prayer, is it Our Father? Our Father who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name, thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. Amen. If I had a dime for every time I had to say that, I'd probably have like $10 or something like that. Maybe 20. Okay. Let's see here. Who was I? So, Count, there never is any negligence in my company, and so my conscience was at ease. I came forward. Berg stood up and showed how he presented himself, with his hand to his cap. And really, it would have been difficult for a face to express greater respect and self-complacency than his did. Well, he stormed at me. As the saying is, stormed and stormed and stormed. It is not a matter of life and rather of death, as the saying is, Albanians and devils and to Siberia, said Berg with a sagacious smile. I knew I was in the right, so I kept silent. Was not that best, Count? Hey, are you dumb? He shouted. Still I remained silent. And what do you think, Count? The next day it was not even mentioned in the orders of the day. That's what keeping one's head means. That's the way, Count, said Berg, lighting his pipe and emitting rings of smoke. Yes, that was fine, said Rostov, smiling. But Boris noticed that he was preparing to make fun of Berg, and skillfully changed the subject. He asked him to tell them how and where he got his wound. This pleased Rostov, and he began talking about it, and as he went on, became more and more animated. Don't you ask me what my scars mean, 'cause they ain't for you, and they ain't for me. Reference there to Show and Tell by Claire Ridgely. He told them of his Sean Gerburn affair, just as those who have taken part in a battle generally do describe it, that is, as they would like it to have been, as they have heard it described by others, and as sounds well, but not at all as it really was. Rostov was a truthful young man and would on no account have told a deliberate lie. He began his story meaning to tell everything just as it happened, but imperceptibly, involuntarily, and inevitably, he lapsed into falsehood. If he had told the truth to his hearers, who like himself had often heard stories of attacks and had formed a definite idea of what an attack was, and were expecting to hear just such a story, they would either not have believed him, or, still worse, would have thought that Rostov was himself to blame, since what generally happens to the narrators of cavalry attacks, had not happened to him. He cannot tell them simply that everyone went at a trot and that he fell off his horse and sprained his arm, and then ran as hard as he could from a Frenchman into the wood. Besides, to tell everything as it really happened, it would have been necessary to make an effort of will to tell only what happened. It's very difficult to tell the truth, and young people are rarely capable of it. His hearers expected a story of how, beside himself and all aflame with excitement, he had flown like a storm at the square, cut his way in, slashed right and left. How a saber had tasted flesh and he had fallen exhausted, and so on. And so he told them all that. It's like a big fish story. People tell him so they seem cool, cooler than they are. I'm not one for telling those kinds of stories. I'm more the type to tell it like it is. Yeah. I think over time, especially, I've become more prone to telling the truth. They say the cold, hard truth because the truth hurts sometimes, and sometimes it can straight up mess you up. And mess up your chances of doing whatever it is you wanted to do. In the middle of his story, just as he was saying, you cannot imagine what a strange frenzy one experiences during an attack. Prince Andrew, whom Boris was expecting, entered the room. Prince Andrew, who liked to help young men, was flattered by being asked for his assistance and being well disposed towards Boris, who had managed to please him the day before. He wished to do what the young man wanted. Having been sent with papers from Kutuzov to the Tsarevich, he looked in on Boris, hoping to find him alone. When he came in and saw a hussar on the line recounting his military exploits, Prince Andrew could not endure that sort of man. He gave Boris a pleasant smile, frowned as with half-closed eyes he looked at Rostov, bowed slightly and wearily, and sat down languidly on the sofa. He felt it unpleasant to have dropped in on bad company. Rostov flushed up on noticing this, but he did not care. This was a mere stranger. Glancing, however, at Boris, he saw that he too seemed ashamed of the hussar on the line. In spite of Prince Andrew's disagreeable, ironical tone, in spite of the contempt with which Rostov, from his fighting army point of view, regarded all these little adjutants on the staff of whom the newcomer was evidently one, Rostov felt confused, blushed, and became silent. Boris inquired what news there might be on the staff, and what, without indiscretion, one might ask about our plans. "We shall probably advance," replied Bolkonsky, evidently reluctant to say more in the presence of a stranger. Berg took the opportunity to ask, with great politeness, whether, as was rumored, the allowance of forged money to captains of companies would be doubled. To this Prince Andrew answered with a smile that he could give no opinion on such an important government order. Berg laughed gaily. "As to your business," Prince Andrew continued, addressing Boris, "we will talk of it later," and he looked around to Rostov. "Come to me after the review and we will do what is possible." Having glanced around the room, Prince Andrew turned to Rostov, whose state of unconquerable childish embarrassment, now changing to anger, he did not condescend to notice, and said, "I think you were talking of the Schongabern affair. Were you there?" "I was there," said Rostov angrily, as if intending to insult the aide-de-camp. Bolkonsky noticed this hussar's state of mind, and it amused him. With a slightly contemptuous smile, he said, "Yes, there are many stories now told about that affair." "Yes, stories," repeated Rostov loudly, looking with eyes suddenly grown furious. Now at Boris, now at Bolkonsky. "Yes, many stories. But our stories are the stories of men who have been under the enemy's fire. Our stories have some weight, not like the stories of those fellows on the staff who get rewards without doing anything." "Yellow bellies, of whom you may imagine me to be one," said Prince Andrew with a quiet and particularly amiable smile. I think Prince Andrew has been close to the battlefield, if I remember. Like, he has at least inspired the men. He may not have fought in the battle, but he's definitely been close to the battlefield. A strange feeling of exasperation yet respect for this man's self-possession mingled at that moment in Rostov's soul. "I'm not talking about you," he said. "I don't know you, and frankly, I don't want to. I'm speaking of the staff in general. And I will tell you this," Prince Andrew interrupted in a tone of quiet authority. "You wish to insult me, and I'm ready to agree with you that it will be very easy to do so if you haven't sufficient self-respect. But admit that the time and place are very badly chosen. In a day or two we shall all have to take part in a greater and more serious duel. And besides, Drubetskoy, who says he's an old friend of yours, is not at all to blame that my face has the misfortune to displease you. However," he added, rising, "you know my name and where to find me. But don't forget that I do not regard either myself or you as having been at all insulted, and as a man older than you, my advice is to let the matter drop." "Well then, on Friday, after the review, I shall expect you, Drubetsky. Au revoir," exclaimed Prince Andrew. With a bow to them, both went out. Only when Prince Andrew was gone did Rostov think of what he ought to have said. He was still more angry at having omitted to say it. He ordered his horse at once, and coldly taking leave of Boris, rode home. Should he go to headquarters next day and challenge that affected adjutant, or really let the matter drop? Was the question that worried him all the way. He thought angrily of the pleasure he would have at seeing the fright of that small and frail but proud man when covered by his pistol. When he felt with surprise that all of the men he knew there was none he would so much like to have for a friend as that very adjutant whom he so hated. Okay, chapter 8 next time. And yeah, a bunch of this discussion, politics. I guess we would call it shooting the breeze. I think which is why War and Peace is such a long novel, because there's a lot of people just yakking in the book. What was the point of that giant monologue? I don't know. It does seem like babble. It does seem like rambling on the part of Leo. That's the reason why it's 20 chapters, or 10 different books. It's we get it. Get to the battle, please. Get to the action. All right, chapter 3, Crime and Punishment. This book, in my opinion, is the better of the two. It's a lot more focused. It tells us just what we need to know. There's not a lot of okay. The fact was that up to the last moment, he had never expected such an ending. He had been overbearing to the last degree, never dreaming that two destitute and defenseless women could escape from his control. His conviction was strengthened by his vanity and conceit, a conceit to the point of fatuity. So we're focusing back on Luzhin. Now, Peter Petrovich, at the end of the last chapter, he broke off his engagement with Dunya Avdotia Romanovna because they went against his request to not invite Raskolnikov, and Dunya was asking him to make good with Raskolnikov because they weren't getting along. Peter Petrovich became frustrated. He thought that it couldn't be the case, and he decided to break off the engagement. It was a pretty heated argument / discussion. Peter Petrovich, who had made his way up from insignificance, was morbidly given to self-admiration. Started from the bottom, now he's here. Had the highest opinion of his intelligence and capacities, and sometimes even gloated in solitude over his image at the glass. But what he loved and valued above all was the money he had amassed by his labor, and by all sorts of devices. That money made him the equal of all who had been his superiors. When he had bitterly reminded Dunya that he had decided to take her in spite of evil report, Peter Petrovich had spoken with perfect sincerity and had indeed felt genuinely indignant at such black ingratitude. And yet, when he made Dunya his offer, he was fully aware of the groundlessness of all the gossip. The story had been everywhere contradicted by Marfa Petrovna, and was then disbelieved by all the townspeople who were warm in Dunya's defense. And he would not have denied that he knew all that at the time. Yet he still thought highly of his own resolution in lifting Dunya to his level, and regarded it as something heroic. Speaking of it to Dunya, he had let it out the secret feeling he cherished and admired, and he could not understand that others should fail to admire it too. He had called on Raskolnikov with the feelings of a benefactor, who was about to reap the fruits of his good deeds and hear agreeable flattery. As he went downstairs now, he considered himself most undeservedly injured and unrecognized. Just extremely good writing on the part of Fyodor Dostoevsky. Hopefully I'm saying that right. He's just a good writer. It's extremely focused narrative. We're focused on Peter Petrovich now, and we know exactly how he feels having broken up with Dunya. And we know why, too. Just really good, just solid writing. Dunya was simply essential to him. To do without her was unthinkable. For many years he had voluptuous dreams of marriage, but he had gone on waiting and amassing money. And he's going into the backstory of the characters. He brooded with relish and profound secret over the image of a girl. Virtuous, poor, she must be poor. Very young, very pretty, of good birth, and education. Very timid, one who had suffered much and was completely humbled before him, one who would all her life look on him as her savior. Worship him, admire him, and only him. How many scenes, how many amorous episodes he had imagined on this seductive and playful theme when his work was over. Behold, the dream of so many years was all but realized. The beauty and education of Avdotya Romanovna had impressed him. Her helpless position had been a great allurement. In her he had found even more than he dreamed of. Here was a girl of pride, character, virtue, of education and breeding superior to his own. He felt that. And this creature would be slavishly grateful all her life for his heroic condescension, would humble herself in the dust before him. He would have absolute unbounded power over her. Not long before, he had, too, after long reflection and hesitation, made an important change in his career. I was now entering on a wider circle of business. With this change, his cherished dreams of rising into a higher class of society seemed likely to be realized. He was, in fact, determined to try his fortune in Petersburg. He knew that women could do a very great deal. The fascination of a charming, virtuous, highly educated woman might make his way easier, might do wonders in attracting people to him, throwing an aureole around him, and now everything was in ruins. Aureola. It's either aureole or aureola. It's like a circle of lights, like a halo. Yeah, crown or halo. Okay. It's just a lot more like concise. I think that's what I like about it. Crime and Punishment. Yeah, I don't even know if I'll complete War and Peace on stream. I may, at the conclusion of Crime and Punishment, just continue War and Peace off stream, because it's laborious as heck to get through that book. Crime and Punishment, I think it's a better book to stream the reading of, because there's a lot more going on, like a lot more action. Like, there's been a double murder. We've had like several suitors for Avdotya revealed. Major characters have passed away, like Marmeladov has died in a tragic carriage accident. Like, there's just so much action. And the book is just very concise. Like, all this has already happened. We're already like over halfway through the book. Okay, let's see. And we're learning a lot about the characters, like, and of course, too, he did love Dunya in his own way. He already possessed her in his dreams, and all at once. No, the next day, the very next day, it must all be set right, smoothed over, settled. Based on how the last chapter ended, I'm not sure that's possible. He can try, though. He's certainly welcome to try. Above all, he must crush that conceited milkshop who is the cause of it all. With a sick feeling, he cannot help recalling Razmahin, too. But he soon reassured himself on that score, as though a fellow like that could be put on a level with him. The man he really dreaded in earnest was Sverdlov. He had, in short, a great deal to attend to. Yeah, there's like a feeding frenzy over Dunya. Like, Luzhin wants to get with her. Razmahin wants to get with her. Sverdlov wants to get with her. Might just have to all just duke it out. Whichever one wins gets her. No, I am more to blame than anyone, said Dunya, kissing and embracing her mother. I was tempted by his money, but on my honor, brother, I had no idea he was such a base man. Yeah, Raskolnikov has seen through all of them from the get-go. If I had seen through him before, nothing would have tempted me. Don't blame me, brother. God has delivered us. God has delivered us. Pulcheria Alexandrovna muttered, but half consciously, as though scarcely able to realize what had happened. They were all relieved, and in 5 minutes they were laughing. Only now and then Dunya turned white and frowned, remembering what had passed. Pulcheria Alexandrovna was surprised to find that she too was glad. She had only that morning thought rupture with Luzhin a terrible misfortune. They must have on some level been aware of that possibility, considering they kind of just threw caution to the wind and brought Raskolnikov anyway. Even when Luzhin made it clear in his letter, he's like, do not bring him to meet with me. That seems like they were okay with that, so they must not be that surprised. Razumhin was delighted. He did not yet dare to express his joy fully, but he was in a fever of excitement as though a ton weight had fallen off his heart. It's like seeing your crush break up with their boyfriend or fiance. You're like, yes, hallelujah, hallelujah, hallelujah. I have a chance now. That's Razumhin. Now he had the right to devote his life to them, to serve them. Anything might happen now. But he felt afraid to think of further possibilities and dared not let his imagination range. But Raskolnikov sat still in the same place, almost sullen and indifferent. Though he had been the most insistent on getting rid of Luzhin, he seemed now the least concerned at what had happened. Dunya could not help thinking that he was still angry with her, and Pulcheria Alexandrovna watched him timidly. "What did Sverdlov say to you?" said Dunya, approaching him. "Yes, yes," cried Pulcheria Alexandrovna. Raskolnikov raised his head. "He wants to make you a present of 10,000 rubles, and he desires to see you once in my presence." "See her? On no account," cried Pulcheria Alexandrovna. "And how dare he offer her money?" Yeah. Reminds me of, there's this dude on TikTok called Two Turn Tony. His mom reminds me of Pulcheria. When she says everything, she's always she's crying or shrieking or screaming. She's a very expressive person. And Pulcheria is a widow. Yeah, a widow. Her husband's died. So now she's trying to, what's it called? Be the, mentor, the facilitator of all these men who are trying to, court Dunya. She's like, I'm going to be the referee of all of this. Then Raskolnikov repeated rather dryly his conversation with Sverdlov, omitting his account of the ghostly visitations of Marfa Petrovna, wishing to avoid all unnecessary talk. As we might recall, when Sverdlov showed up in Raskolnikov's place, all these guys keep just randomly showing up in Raskolnikov's place. He's like, yes, hello, do I know you? They're talking a lot about ghosts, and apparently Sverdlov was married to Marfa Petrovna, Dunya and Pulcheria's previous landlady combo. Marfa Petrovna has passed away. Many people think that I think is because of Sverdlov, I believe. And he was saying that he saw Marfa's ghost. It's hard to say if that was the grief or if the dude is just straight up hallucinating. We really don't know. "What answer did you give him?" asked Dunya. "At first I said I would not take any message to you. Then he said that he would do his utmost to obtain an interview with you without my help. He assured me that his passion for you was a passing infatuation. Now he has no feeling for you. He doesn't want you to marry Luzhin." His talk was altogether rather muddled. It seems like he does still have feelings for Avdotya, and when he does meet with her, he's probably going to propose or something like that. "How do you explain him to yourself, Rodya? How did he strike you?" "I must confess I don't quite understand him. He offers you 10,000 and yet says he is not well off. He said, and I believe that's a lot more than it is in today's money." Exactly how much more, I'm not exactly sure. But yeah, 10 grand back then was a pretty good chunk of change. He says he's going away, and in 10 minutes he forgets he has said it. Then he says he's going to be married, and he's already fixed on the girl. No doubt he has a motive, and probably a bad one. But it's odd that he should. And Raskolnikov, say what you will about the guy, he's consistent as heck. Like, he was distrustful of Luzhin, and he's distrustful of Sverdlov. Like, he doesn't want any of these dudes marrying his sister. No doubt he has a motive, probably a bad one. It's odd that he should be so clumsy about it if he had any designs against you. Of course I refused this money on your account once and for all. Altogether I thought him very strange. One might almost think he was mad. But I may be mistaken. That may only be the part he assumes. The death of Marfa Petrovna seems to have made a great impression on him. I mean, he's seeing her, for goodness sake. Like, either they're like grief-induced hallucinations that he's having, or the dude's actually nuts. God rest her soul, exclaimed Pulcheria Alexandrovna. I shall always, always pray for her. Where should we be now, Dunya, without his 3,000? It's as though it had fallen from heaven. When Marfa Petrovna died, she left them 3 grand in her will. Why, Rodya, this morning we had only 3 rubles in our pocket, and Dunya and I were just planning to pawn her watch, so as to avoid borrowing from that man until he offered help. Dunya seemed strangely impressed by Sverdlov's offer. She still stood meditating. Now, I ain't saying she a gold digger, but she ain't messing with no broke. Cute Kanye West. Like, yeah, Dunya's definitely got money on the mind. She wants to marry into money. He's got, and I think that that's going to cut out Razmahin, I think. He's got some terrible plan, she said in half-whisper to herself, almost shuddering. Raskolnikov noticed this disproportionate terror. I fancy I shall have to see him more than once again, he said to Dunya. We will watch him. I will track him out, cried Razmahin vigorously. I won't lose sight of him. Rodya has given me leave. He said to me himself just now, take care of my sister. Will you give me leave too, Avdotya Romanovna? Dunya smiled and held out her hand, but the look of anxiety did not leave her face. Pulcheria Alexandrovna gazed at her timidly, but the 3,000 rubles had obviously a soothing effect on her. A quarter of an hour later, they were all engaged in a lively conversation. Even Raskolnikov listened attentively for some time, though he did not talk. Razmahin was the speaker. And why? Why should you go away? He flowed on ecstatically. What are you to do in a little town? The great thing is you're all here together and you need one another. You do need one another, believe me. For a time anyway, take me into partnership, and I assure you we'll plan a capital enterprise. Listen, I'll explain it all in detail to you, the whole project. It all flashed into my head this morning, before anything had happened. I tell you what, I have an uncle. I must introduce him to you. A most accommodating and respectable old man. This uncle has got a capital of 1,000 rubles, and he lives on his pension and has no need of that money. For the last 2 years, he's been bothering me to borrow it from him and pay him 6% interest. I know what that means. He simply wants to help me. Last year I had no need of it, but this year I resolved to borrow it as soon as he arrived. Then you lend me another 1,000 for your 3. We have enough for a start. We'll go into partnership. And what are we going to do? Razmahin's all planning their future together. Then Razmahin began to unfold his project, and he explained at length that almost all our publishers and booksellers know nothing at all of what they're selling, and for that reason they're usually bad publishers, and that any decent publications pay as a rule and give a profit, sometimes a considerable one. Razmahin had indeed been dreaming of setting up as a publisher. For the last 2 years he had been working in publishers' offices, and knew 3 European languages well, though he had told Raskolnikov 6 days before that he was Swatch in German, with an object of persuading him to take half his translation and half the payment for it. He had told a lie then, and Raskolnikov knew he was lying. Why? Why should we let our chance slip when we have one of the chief means of success, money of our own? Cried Razmahin warmly. Of course there will be a lot of work, but we will work. You, Avdotya Romanovna, I, Rodyan, You get a splendid profit on some books nowadays, and the great point of the business is that we shall know just what wants translating. We shall be translating, publishing, learning all at once. I can be of use because I have experience. For nearly 2 years, I've been scuttling about among the publishers, and now I know every detail of their business. These, dreams almost never become realized. It reminds me of The Great Gatsby, whenever this happens. You need not be a saint to make pots, believe me. Why? Why should we let our chance slip? Why, I know. I kept a secret, 2 or 3 books, which one might get 100 rubles simply for thinking of translating and publishing. Indeed, I would not take 500 for the very idea of one of them. What do you think? If I were to tell a publisher, I dare say he'd hesitate. They're such blockheads. As for the business side, printing, paper selling, you trust me. I know my way about. We'll begin in a small way and go on to a large. In any case, it will get us our living, and we shall get back our capital. Dunia's eyes shone. I like what you're saying, Dmitri Prokofitch, she said. I know nothing about it, of course, put in Pulcheria Alexandrovna. It may be a good idea, but again, God knows. It's new and untried. Of course we must remain here, at least for a time. She looked at Rodya. What do you think, brother, said Dunya. I think he's got a very good idea, he answered. I think so too. Books were pretty big back then. You have to remember, this was well before the internet age. And again, books are how people knew stuff back then. So anything that's in the printing business is going to be a good idea. It's like the internet age now. It's like the internet age now. Of course, it's soon to dream of a publishing firm, but we might bring out 5 or 6 books and be sure of success. I know of one book myself which would be sure to go well. As for his being able to manage it, there's no doubt about that either. He knows the business, but we can talk it over later. Hurrah, cried Razmahin. Now stay, there's a flat here in this house, belonging to the same owner. It's a special flat apart, not communicating with these lodgings. It's furnished, rent moderate, 3 rooms. Suppose you take them to begin with. I'll pawn your watch tomorrow and bring you the money, and everything can be arranged then. You can all 3 live together, and Rodya will be with you. But where are you off to, Rodya? What, Rodya, are you going already? Pulcheria Alexandrovna asked in dismay. At such a minute, cried Razmahin. Dunya looked at her brother with incredulous wonder. He held his cap in his hand. He was preparing to leave them. It could also be the case that the reason why this reads so well is because it's more recent. War and Peace was written in 1805, if I'm recalling correctly. A full 60 years before Crime and Punishment was published. So that could have something to do with the reason why it reads so well. Because Crime and Punishment of the 2 books is the more recent one. I gotta be right back. I have to use the bathroom again. Again, just solid writing on Fyodor's part. I think Picture of Dorian was a good book to read for a stream, and I think Crime and Punishment was also a good book to read for a stream. War and Peace, not so much. Like I said, I'll probably discontinue it when this book concludes. We're over halfway through, so I might choose another book to take its place or start another gameplay series, as I keep alluding to. Cow's going to leave. One would think you were burying me or saying goodbye forever, he said somewhat oddly. He attempted to smile, but it did not turn out a smile. But who knows, perhaps it is the last time we shall see each other. He let slip accidentally. It was what he was thinking, and it somehow was uttered aloud. What's the matter with you? Cried his mother. Where are you going, Roger? Asked Dunya rather strangely. Oh, I'm quite obliged to, he answered vaguely, as though hesitating what he would say. But there was a look of sharp determination in his white face. I meant to say, as I was coming here, I meant to tell you, Mother, and you, Dunya, that it would be better for us to part for a time. I feel ill. I am not at peace. I'll come afterwards. I will come of myself, when it's possible. I remember you and love you. Leave me. Leave me alone. I decided this even before. I'm absolutely resolved on it. Whatever may come to me, whether I come to ruin or not, I want to be alone. Forget me altogether, it's better. Don't inquire about me. When I can, I'll come of myself, or I'll send for you. Perhaps it will all come back, but now if you love me, give me up. Else I shall begin to hate you, I feel it. Goodbye. Good God, cried Pulcheria Alexandrovna. Pulcheria's, like, again, she's very expressive, right? Both his mother and his sister were terribly alarmed. Razumhin was also. Roja, be reconciled with us. Let us be as before, cried his poor mother. He turned slowly to the door and slowly went out of the room. Dunya overtook him. Brother, what are you doing to Mother? She whispered, her eyes flashing with indignation. He looked dully at her. No matter, I shall come, I'm coming, he muttered in an undertone, as though not fully conscious of what he was saying, and he went out of the room. Wicked, heartless egoist, cried Dunya. He's insane, but not heartless. He's mad. Don't you see it? You're heartless after that. Razumhin whispered in her ear, squeezing her hand tightly. I shall be back directly, he shouted to the horror-stricken mother, and he ran out of the room. Raskolnikov was waiting for him at the end of the passage. I knew you would run after me, he said. Go back to them. Be with them. Be with them tomorrow and always. I perhaps shall come, if I can. Goodbye. Without holding out his hand, he walked away. But where are you going? What are you doing? What's the matter with you? How can you go on like this? Razumhin muttered at his wit's end. Raskolnikov stopped once more. Once for all, never ask me about anything. I have nothing to tell you. Don't come to see me. Maybe I'll come here. Leave me. But don't leave them. Do you understand me? It was dark in the corridor. They were standing near the lamp. For a minute they were looking at one another in silence. Razumhin remembered that minute all his life. Raskolnikov's burning and intent eyes grew more penetrating every moment, piercing into his soul, into his consciousness. Suddenly Razumhin started. Something strange, as it were, passed between them. Some idea, some hint, as it were, slipped something awful, hideous, and suddenly understood on both sides. Razumhin turned pale. Does he know now? I don't know. Do you understand now? Said Raskolnikov, his face twitching nervously. Go back. Go to them, he said suddenly, and turning quickly, he went out of the house. I will not attempt to describe how Razumhin went back to the ladies, how he soothed them, how he protested that Roja needed rest in his illness. Protested that Roja was sure to come, that he would come every day, that he was very, very much upset, that he must not be irritated, that he, Razumhin, would watch over him, would get him a doctor, the best doctor, a consultation. In fact, from that evening, Razumhin took his place with them as a son and a brother. And yes, he is still definitely trying to get with Dunya. We'll see what Sverdlov and Luzhin come up with, though. Yeah, we'll see. And let's see, how far in are we? 57%. So yeah, Crime and Punishment. Man, I gotta say, it is an exceptional book. Like, it's really been great to read. Like, it has not been laborious like War and Peace. War and Peace, we're not even 20% of the way through that book. But Crime and Punishment, we're over halfway through. It's just such a good book. Like, we're breezing through it. There's a lot of action, a lot of things that we learn, characterization of the characters. Like, in this chapter, we got to learn more about Razmahin, a little bit about Lucian's reaction to his disengagement with Dunya. We were also able to see and hear a little bit from Raskolnikov about Sverdlov. And we learned more about Raskolnikov too. So, like, just a bunch of action, characterization happening. And I'm really looking forward to see how the book ends. Like, we're almost there, 57% through. So, thank you for watching. I hope you've been enjoying this series as much as I've enjoyed providing this content. I'll be back here pretty quick with Hearthstone following Phoenix Wright. So it should be Phoenix Hearthstone. Thank you for watching, and I'll be right back.